So soul is typically what's missing. When soul is present, we can hold the opposites together. We can hold the masculine and the feminine. We can hold time with timelessness when soul is present, because soul is both ancient and immediate. That's the beautiful nature of the soul. The soul is our connection to the most ancient things, the deep treasury of human inheritance that most people are not even aware of, which can also be called the universal archetypes that underpin human life. And on the other hand, the immediate moment, which can always open to inspiration, to invention, to art and creativity. The soul holds those two things together. And so when things are falling apart, it's usually a lack of soul. And then what I'm trying to say is, even when things are falling apart on the surface, there is a response from the depth of the human soul, partially in the form of awakening archetypes. And I'll repeat the idea. When we understand things like that, it helps us realize we are not alone. We are educated to think we are an isolated, accidental being in the midst of a world that cannot be understood because it's accidental also. The sense of deep archetypal energies that carry knowledge, that also can provide motivation and have aims, is a different sense, a different understanding, a different vision than that idea that it's all an accident. So many of the symptoms at the end of an era involve this polarization between the old, cold, tired, hidebound, time-bound, dominant institutions, energies, attitudes, and the trying to awaken new, visionary, transformative energies that are always there also. I hope that's making sense, because you can look at many of the things happening in the world as the polarization of the tension between those two things. And when those things become more polarized in the world, they become more polarized inside a person. And back to the beginning of this, we are going to be crushed by the weight of the historical problems coming to the surface of life if we don't have access to the deep resources and the grounding potentials of the soul, and in particular, this capacity to touch back into the ancient, which is trying to catch up with us, and also envision things that have not been seen yet, which is part of the Kairos moment. So when I bring the human soul and the individual soul into this, I'm using an old idea which says that humans are the make weights in the scales of time. Human make weight is a reference to the weight that used to be used to measure precious things like gold and silver, the make weight. So each human being, although tiny, is also at the soul level a make weight in this attempt to rebalance the world and enter another cycle of life. And so are we small, frail, and overwhelmed? Yes. Are we tuned in some deep way to the dynamics of the world, of the cosmos, of nature, of the capacity for to be present and allow things to die and fall or dissolve, and also be present to those things that are trying to awaken? Yes. And we become the make weights. And added to that has to be the notion that all meaningful change in culture begins in the individual soul. The idea of changing people from the top, big agreements, singular beliefs, a single idea, it doesn't happen, it doesn't work. It leads into polarization. But if something awakens in the depth of the soul, where the individual struggles to work out a dynamic balance between that which is old and that which is new, or that which is senex and that which is puer, or that which is young and involved with the dream of life, and that which is old and wise, you can layer the pairings all the way down. As that awakens, the person becomes a make-weight. And in doing that, we're not being heroic. We're simply living an expression out into the world of the creative depth and imagination of our own soul. And my sense of it is the Kairos moment becomes transformational when that happens to many individuals at the same time, not because of some figurative agreement, but because of an agreement with one's own soul, and then an awakening to the potentials, which begins to affect not just the individuals, but others get affected and so on. So that's part of the idea. And I'm saying that we don't have to make this all up ourselves and figure it all out and be in that heroic position, which I think is part of the problem. But at this point, because the archetypes, so the archetypes are universal energies, ideas, and images all together. There's three parts. The image, the idea, and the vital energy are all composites of the archetypes. And so the archetypes, in a sense, suited to the conditions in the outside world, which I used as the title of this event, healer, mentor, elder, guide. The idea wasn't to say, I'm now going to teach you how to be that. And the idea wasn't either to say, by the way, I am all of that. The idea was to say, these are the archetypes that naturally stir and awaken at the end of an era and when there's so much tension and polarization in the world. The archetype, take the healer. The archetypal term is wounded healer. It's a complex. It has the wound and the healing together. And so this complex dynamic awakens the mentor and the student. They awaken together. And when we allow those energies to move through us, we become both. That's why the term wounded healer is so beautiful and properly attuned. In other words, the idea is to find one's way of healing, and you can't really do that on a soulful level unless we engage with our own wounds. And so on the engaging with the wound side, we become deeply human and realize everybody's wounded. And that gives us a greater reservoir of both sympathy and empathy, right? The healer has to remain in that empathic situation. And then the healing part, the way I go after that is the old idea that every elder is a healer. So that doesn't mean every elder goes to medical school. It means that when a person follows the natural dynamic gradient and arc of their life, let's say they're an artist, they become capable without planning it to bring some healing through the art. And so whatever it is, a person becomes someone who works with elements of nature, maybe entering through the door of science. But as they learn about nature itself, they become aware of how nature heals, and that helps them become a healer that can join nature, but also bring healing ideas, images, and energies back to culture. So that's the archetype. The archetype, I'll repeat, it brings conscious awareness to a certain kind of dynamic. It brings motivation. It can add to one's motivation. I'll give the example of the mother archetype. When the mother archetype kicks in, you can see it all over the world. The mother will engage with that infant. If it's a healthy situation, she will engage body, spirit, and soul with that infant, and she will be motivated to do so because of the arising energy of the archetype itself, which is mother and child. She will be more powerfully in that union because the archetype arises. So there's motivation that comes with the archetype, and then archetypes are aimed. The mother archetype is aimed at nourishing and helping to grow the child. So I'm just giving one example of that. And so I'm saying in this troubled world, which is going through a radical shedding, by which I mean institutions are breaking down, practices and understandings that used to be taken for granted are now, just don't hold energy anymore. And the energies are like free floating all over the place. And I'm saying that motivation to face those things, deal with those things, and integrate more meaning into our own lives doesn't have to come from the ego, for instance, which is easily overwhelmed, or even from the will simply. If we allow it, it can arise from the archetypes themselves. We're not alone. Our own souls are connected to things that have natural healing, mentoring, guiding elements.